as you probably are aware, have a reputation on this ship as being someone who gives a good speech. You've been known for your air wing of destiny speech among the crew. They give you a hard time about it. You're professionals as well. As you were inbound and outbound, did you, and you and I discussed this a couple weeks ago about what might you say to the men, and you weren't sure as you were actually on the way into the target. Was it just all business, or was there a word?
It was mostly all business. There were a couple of, wow, look at that. But it is an air wing of destiny, and I'll tell you what, we're at the right place at the right time. It's an honor to serve.
And on your way back out, anything, was there a sense of excitement, a sense of accomplishment, still looking forward to the night landing on a carrier, or what?
Well, I thought I flew a pretty nice pass tonight, but I had a moon to help out a little bit. So the hop is not over until you've chalked and chained the airplane and you've safely gotten out and off the flight deck. So I'm so thankful. The good Lord smiled on us today. I'm very thankful to have everybody back safely.
Tell me about the performance of your men. You had nuggets in that group. These are first-time cruisers. You're, of course, one of the veterans. Tell me how they performed.
Magnificently. Just terrific. I couldn't be more pleased or more proud of the young folks, not just the aviators. There's anybody that has any kind of doubts about the future of this nation's next generation should come out here and take a look at these young heroes.
Sir, we're going to end it on that note, and thank you very much. You just got out of your jet. I know you got a debrief, and I appreciate your time, sir. No problem. All right, Captain Mark Fox, the carrier air wing commander on USS Constellation, literally out of his jet and walked over and took time with us, and we'll send it back to you.
Frank, it's Miles, and hopefully you can still hear me okay on the deck of that ship. I know it's awfully loud. If you could just give us a sense, take the temperature of the ship for us. Could you give us a sense of the mood on there? And do they have, are they feeling the weight of the stress, or the pressure of the moment, if you will?
Yeah, Miles, you know, the mood on the ship has certainly, since the president issued the deadline, lifted significantly. This is a ship that's been on station here in the Persian Gulf since mid-December. They've been flying operations, sorties into Iraq as part of Operation Southern Watch, never going above the 33rd parallel, however. Tonight was the first night they did that as a strike package. The morale was, you know, as it gets toward the end of a deployment. They were supposed to rotate out of here if this was a normal deployment about now. They wanted to know something. Are we staying? Are we going? Are we moving in? Are we not? That's the crew speaking. And they were, frankly, pretty happy to hear that there was at least a deadline, that something was happening. Tonight, I stood in the observation area of this aircraft carrier known as Vulture's Row, where you stand on the island overlooking the flight deck as this package with Captain Fox took off. There have been a couple of occasions where I've seen many people out there. Tonight, it really was in a darkened Vulture's Row, standing room only. The entire rail was lined with sailors and airmen looking down, really understanding the sense of this moment, knowing that this was the first night of airstrikes. They were watching and clearly understanding what was happening here. They knew long before everyone in the U.S., they knew before the people in Iraq that these munitions were inbound. There was no high-fiving. There weren't people who were jumping or excited. It wasn't like that. It was more of a professional atmosphere, and a sense of this moment in history is what I observed.
What about the tempo? Do you expect, do you have any sense of what lies ahead? Is it going to be continued levels of sorties for the foreseeable future, or are they sharing that information with you, Frank?
They are sharing it, and I want to be very careful, as I know you do, Miles, about exactly how much we want to share, just to make sure that we don't put anyone in harm's way. But suffice it to say that, as the captain was just saying, air operations are continuing. They are continuing not only on this aircraft carrier, but the USS Lincoln and the USS Kitty Hawk. All three of these carriers steaming in the Persian Gulf. And when one goes down, that is when one ship goes to sleep, and that's a relative term, of course, but when they're not doing flight ops, another one is already transitioning in, and another one is transitioning in as that one starts to go to sleep. So with 3 aircraft carriers that are active with hot flight decks, you can imagine each one of these aircraft carriers has roughly 70 or so aircraft, and the strike fighters will constantly be moving for quite some time.
CNN's Frank Buckley, and perhaps the most important point, everybody back home, in a manner of speaking, safe and sound on the USS Constellation in the Persian Gulf. General Wes Clark, as you listen to that report, you know, I'm always reminded of just the hazards of the operations of war.
It's an incredible,
an aircraft
difficult.
carrier is a dangerous thing in peace or war, and
Yes.
to know that they can execute these missions into Baghdad and have everybody come back safe and sound is a testament to, as Frank put it, the professionalism of these people.
I think one of the toughest missions in the armed forces has to be to land on an aircraft carrier at night. And here in this small body of water, the Persian Gulf, we've got several aircraft carriers, we've got many other ships, we've got congestion in there. So the seamanship is superb to keep the flight deck moving in the right direction, to bring in those aircraft at the right time. It's tough on the pilots. It's great professionalism.
Well, and as you say, it's tight enough having the carrier groups maneuvering for space in the Persian Gulf. Of course, we have some over in the Red Sea as well. But then when they get into this airspace, the coordination that is required across all services to get everybody into and out of harm's way safely, coordinated, get them onto their targets, it really boggles the mind.
It's staggering, really. I mean, and it only comes from lots and lots of practice. We have done this again and again and again, and we get better and better at it, and it's the same people who come up through the system and learn and grow with it, and step by step innovate and improve it.
All right, I want to show some of that the video which we've been showing you and explain to you. This is what we have here is an F-117 for a demonstration, which we know were involved. This is a bunker buster weapon, some of the weaponry that we are fairly confident was used in all of this. And what that demonstrates there, and it's worth pointing out, is that it has the ability to penetrate and then explode below surface. Now, when we saw those multiple strikes in that palace compound, and what seemed to occur in the same spot multiple times, which is a testament to the precision right there, what does that tell you? They're just auguring deeper and deeper, and we're talking about something that has a tremendous underground infrastructure?
Well, I think that's true. There is a tremendous underground infrastructure, and I think that some of the weapons were probably bunker busters and some may not have been. And so you may see at first that we strike it on the surface and then we put a bunker buster through it, or right next door we put a bunker buster into it.
I see. So looking at those explosions, with a trained eye, you can get a little sense of it. We probably shouldn't jump to too many conclusions then about exactly what we're seeing there, right?
You can't be certain when you look at it without precision measurement. You don't know exactly how far away you are. You don't know what's in the target. But it looked to me like some of the explosions went off deeper underground than others did, and that would be the indication of a bunker buster.
All right, I want to ask you one philosophical question here. That when you witness that power, it is so tremendous, and the air superiority is something that no nation has won a war without in the modern era. Nevertheless, I'm talking to a guy who wore a green suit, an Army general, who would tell you the value of bringing actual people into Baghdad here. You really can't have one without the other when you talk about the objective that is on the plate here right now.
With these objectives, as described by Secretary Rumsfeld today, got to have boots on the ground for this. The air power may dissuade the Iraqis from fighting, but to get those weapons of mass destruction out of there, to get the linkages with the proliferating countries and industries, got to have people on the ground for that.
So air power has some limitations.
Does have limitations, but it's also indispensable.
All right, fair enough. Well put. General Wes Clark, diplomatically put for an Army general.
For an Army guy.
We appreciate that. We'll send it to Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Thanks, Miles. All
Great.
of that is fascinating. We're, of course, looking at the countries that ring Iraq, some of them being in a very delicate diplomatic situation today in Jordan, which borders Iraq to its west. Today, the king of Jordan, King Abdullah, went on television to urge the people of his country to temper the anger that some of them are demonstrating out in the streets, sympathy with the Iraqi people, urging them to think about the consequences of that. He is in what could be a very dicey political situation. We have a correspondent, Rula Amin, who is actually on the border of Jordan and Iraq. She's on the Jordanian side. Rula, I want to ask you about how many Iraqi refugees may have been coming across there trying to leave Iraq. Rula?
Judy, almost no Iraqi refugees have been able to make it through the border here. The Jordanians have very strict restrictions on those borders. They say they cannot allow many refugees to come through Jordan. They simply cannot afford to absorb a large number of refugees, and they want to make sure that Iraqis know that they are not welcome here. So they have been putting very strict restrictions, and we have not seen one Iraqi refugee at one of the refugee camps that had been set up here by the government and by the United Nations humanitarian agencies in order to receive these refugees. So far, no refugees. Judy?
Rula, another matter I want to ask you about. Today, the U.S. Military announced that they've taken over 2 important airfields in western Iraq, so-called H2 and H3 air bases. What's the significance of that to the Jordanian officials and others you're talking to?
Well, it's significant on a number of fronts. First, these troops are about 75 kilometers east to where I'm standing right now. They have taken over 2 strategic airfields. And why it's significant is that because some of those airfields are more than 8,000 feet long, which means they may be able to allow big planes, a large aircraft, military aircraft, supply aircraft to land there, to bring U.S. troops, to bring supplies. And that means this is very close to the main highway between Amman and Baghdad. And that way the U.S. troops and the British troops will be able to control that major road. Now behind me you can see the lit arches. This is the border, and on the other side of the border the Iraqi soldiers are still manning that border. However, with the presence of the U.S. troops so close now, they are being cut off from the headquarters in Baghdad. Still, as I said before, the Iraqi soldiers are still there and they're still manning those borders. On another front, the fact that these U.S. troops have taken over the airfields very close to the border here actually substantiate some opposition leaders here doubts and accusations to the government that the government is allowing some U.S. special troops and special operation forces in order to use Jordan as a launching pad to carry out some offensive operations in Iraq. This is something that the Jordanian government denies. They say there are U.S. troops here, hundreds of them, including special forces, but they are here to defend Jordan. And the information minister today made sure he said that any claim that these special operation forces came from Jordan is lies. It's meant to harm Jordan. And the reason why he's being so defensive is that the people here are very much against this war. They have been urging the government not to allow the U.S. troops to use Jordan as a launching pad. And that's why the government is being very sensitive about telling people that they are cooperating with the U.S. Army in this war if there is such a cooperation. We have to remember that the western desert, Iraq's western desert, is where Iraq had launched its Scud missiles onto Israel in the last Gulf War. And probably the special operation forces have been careful and have been looking for these Scud missile launchers to make sure that there are no Scud missiles launched against Israel in this war. Judy?
Which has to be an enormous relief to the Israeli people. Our correspondent, Kelly Wallace, in fact, reporting on that just today. Rula Amin reporting from the Jordanian side of the Iraqi-Jordan border, and, of course, underlining just how sensitive the politics are of this war for these governments that are, in many cases, trying to be helpful to the U.S., but knowing that it is not a popular war with their people. Well, we are going to take a look now at the latest this hour. We're going to get a wrap from Heidi Collins, who has a news alert.
Thank you, Judy. Here is the very latest. Now, more explosions have rocked Baghdad after an unprecedented bombardment a few hours ago. U.S.-led forces have unleashed their long-awaited and punishing air assault. CNN is reporting the sprawling Republican Palace complex in downtown Baghdad was one of the targets hit. Now, the Pentagon says it will strike several hundred targets during its massive air campaign. Coalition forces are in control of the southern Iraqi city of Qasr and have pushed 100 miles into the country, heading towards Baghdad. They plan to use the port in Qasr to bring humanitarian aid into Iraq. The U.S. and Marine flags were raised over the city briefly, then lowered out of respect for local residents. As American and British troops push ahead toward Baghdad, coalition officials are still concerned the Iraqi regime will use a so-called scorched earth policy to destroy oil wells. A British official says retreating Iraqi troops have set fire to at least 7 wells. Thousands of angry voices spoke out today in Egypt's capital. Riot police were called out after a huge crowd of anti-war demonstrators gathered in the streets of Cairo. The rioters were trying to march to the U.S. embassy, but police cordoned off a 4-block area around the complex. CNN's coverage of the strike on Iraq continues right now. I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington. My colleague, Wolf Blitzer, in Kuwait City.
Thanks very much, Judy. People here in Kuwait, not only in Kuwait City, but throughout Kuwait, are breathing a lot easier tonight as U.S. and British forces move on the ground against targets in southern Iraq. According to the Pentagon, they're 100 miles already, some of those forces into southern Iraq. Other U.S. troops on the ground in western Iraq as well as northern Iraq. Earlier in the day, over the past several hours, huge explosions rocked Iraq's capital of Baghdad. Explosions that hit several targets, according to eyewitnesses, including the foreign ministry complex in Baghdad, other government buildings as well. Explosions that could be heard throughout the city. All 5 million people of Baghdad clearly affected by the sounds, the fury, the pounding of those airstrikes, the start of what the Pentagon is calling A-Day, the beginning of the shock and awe air campaign that coincides with the ground campaign. Elsewhere in Iraq, airstrikes are continuing as well, including in the northern part of Iraq, in Mosul and Kirkuk, areas that have been under the control of Saddam Hussein's Republican Guard, areas with significant developments, significant resources as well. The air campaign continuing, the Pentagon saying several hundred more airstrikes, including targets, of course, expected over the next several hours. CNN's Frank Buckley is aboard the USS Constellation, one of 3 U.S. aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, another 2 in the eastern Mediterranean. What's happening right now, Frank?
Well, Wolf, we've found another couple of aviators who were involved in the first strike off the Constellation into Iraq. They're part of the Oscar Bravo Sierra package. We have Lieutenant Pat Cronin, who's an EA-6B crew member, pilot, or ECMO, and Captain Bill Barber, F-18 pilot from the Death Rattler Squadron, BMFA 323. First, let me talk to Pat. You guys fly the Prowler, the radar jammer. Tell me what it was like for you going into the area around Baghdad.
Well, it's absolutely impressive. We came in and immediately could see the TLAM impacting in downtown Baghdad, and just continuous, constant explosions going off all over the place. You saw the AAA coming up. Occasionally you see some missile bursts. And then basically as the air package flew in, you could see missiles coming off our aircraft, other members of the package coming in, and just tremendous amount of activity on the ground, coming up through the air, and of course coming down from us.
Was it what you expected?
I'm not even sure what I expected, but this was something I don't think I'd ever forget. It's really impressive.
That's exactly what CAG Fox was saying when he briefed you guys earlier, that you would never forget this night, that you were going downtown and near, at least in the vicinity of Baghdad. There's been a great deal of discussion about the air defense ring around Baghdad. The air defenses in the south and the north have been eroded significantly during Operations Southern and Northern Watch, but the ring around Baghdad, your job is to jam that radar. How was it?
Actually, I think we couldn't have done a better job. We had tremendous asset support from the Marine Corps, from our other Navy squadrons that are shore-based, and basically couldn't ask for our jets to perform better today. I don't think they even saw one of us. They were, as far as I could tell, shooting ballistically and weren't tracking. So everyone came out safe, and that's really our goal. That's what tells us we did our job right.
All right, thanks, Pat. And we'd like to move over to Captain Bill Barber. You're an F-18 driver. You're one of the strike fighters. Tell me, first of all, first impressions of the night for you.
Just an incredible experience. I don't think, like Pat said, I don't think anything we could have thought of would have prepared us for what we were going to see happening on the ground out there. There's nothing that we do for all the training that we go through. There's nothing that's real world like that that can get you ready for it. And to know that they're down there really shooting at you, and to be able to see it, and it's pretty staggering.
And you guys, you're veterans of flying Southern Watch missions. You've been shot at before. You've taken AAA, and you've had, the surface-to-air firings, the Sapphire incident. Is it comparable, or a much lower intensity? That's not to say that the danger isn't there during the Southern Watch missions. They're hoping for the golden BB that is going to come up and get one of us, but there's no comparison between what we saw tonight and what you would see. You almost call it a run-of-the-mill OSW mission if that isn't too oversimplified there. Your job is to unleash incredible munitions, and we've heard about the precision nature of these munitions. Did your missiles go off the racks as planned?
Yeah. Tonight we were dropping JSOW, Joint Standoff Weapons, glide weapon. So by the time it gets to the target and does its thing, we're long gone, out of town. So we don't really get to see the fruits of our labor there. But we know just from what we tell them to do that it's going to get to where it needs to go.
Explain to people how you guys handle it emotionally. The idea that you know what these munitions are doing when they leave the rails. How do you deal with that on a personal level?
On a personal level, I'd say you just tell yourself, for one thing, if it wasn't me that was doing it, it'd be somebody else. I'm going to get in and do the job as best I can, so nobody else has to go in and do it. Either do it later again to clean up my mess, or fix something that I messed up. So.
In my time on this aircraft carrier and on various others, whenever I ask an aviator, what is your biggest fear on a mission? It seems to never be, I don't want to get shot down, or it seems to be, I don't want to screw up. That's what I hear over and over from you guys. How do you feel about your performance tonight?
I feel like I put a whole lot of effort into making this thing happen tonight, and really gratifying to see it all come together, see it go as advertised, and most importantly, see everybody come back unscathed and unhurt.
All right, I'm sure your families, if they're watching, will be happy to see your face. Thank you very much, Captain.
Frank Buckley, thanks very much, Frank. Unfortunately, I have to interrupt you. I have to go to Judy Woodruff in Washington. She's got something important. Judy?
Thanks, Wolf. We have some video that's just coming in, Wolf, and that is the Iraqi information minister talking to reporters.
Follow, they would and guarantee the transparency and work towards establishing facts. This was prepared for them as a guest house, and next to it there is the Zuhur Palace, and it is an old palace from the royal era of Iraq. Was preserved and kept as is, with its simple furniture and paintings and everything, so that it will be one of the landmarks of the contemporary history of Iraq. They destroyed it, and I will show you the Zuhur Palace. Maybe now it's dark, but tomorrow you can take footage of it completely. Thank you very much. Mr. Minister, do you expect that a change will happen in the battle strategy to go to counter attack to defeat the Americans? We and our leadership of armed forces will decide that so that we guarantee their defeat, those mercenaries' defeat. God willing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We were just listening to the Iraqi Information Minister, Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, describing some of the damage around a presidential palace. We weren't able to catch the first part of what he said, but it sounded like what his point was, that it was an historic building that the American military, in his words, had destroyed. He said, tomorrow I will take you here. Tonight it's dark. I can't show you. And at the end, a defiant statement. He said, our leadership will defy, we will defeat the mercenaries. Well, that was the word from, I'm sorry, I have a producer. We're looking now at these are pictures coming into us from Iraqi television of damage from U.S. Missiles, U.S. weapons, and we presume this is in the Baghdad area. We are seeing this for the first time as you are seeing it. We can't tell you where this is or what it is, but what we can tell you is that the buildings that were hit have been described to us as all government buildings or residences or so-called palaces of the Saddam Hussein regime. So we can presume that these pictures are from some of those buildings. There is a palace in Baghdad, I'm just now being told, the Peace Palace in Baghdad, that we are looking at, pictures that we're seeing right now. Clearly a lot of this is in the dark. Peace Palace. And we are seeing these pictures again for the first time, just as you are, trying to make sense of what they are and where it is. Is there any sound with these pictures, or is it just the video? All right. All right, well, as we look at this and try to figure if there's something, we saw a table and chairs there, but we don't know what else. Perhaps this was part of the scene that the information minister was describing, part of a palace complex. And he did, we are told this is something called the Peace Palace. While we're looking at this, we want to, and we'll continue to show you these pictures from Iraqi television. We want to go to the White House, to our correspondent, John King. And John, the White House, the president has not been very visible the last few days, but he did make a brief statement to reporters earlier.
He did, Judy. That was during a meeting with congressional leaders, the bipartisan leadership summoned to the White House by the president so that he could brief them on the war plans. And as we watch these photographs, obviously we are in an escalation of the military campaign, and this is an escalation of the political risk, if you will, for the Bush administration. If there are, in fact, high civilian casualties inside Iraq, that could turn the politics of this debate. And the Bush administration, from the White House to the Pentagon, is emphasizing today the precision of these weapons systems and saying that the targeting is only on government buildings and leadership buildings and military buildings, and that the administration is confident that while perhaps there may be an occasional accident, that it will significantly limit the loss of innocent life. That message also underscored in this letter here. This is the official notification from the President of the United States to the United States Congress that he has decided to use military force. This notification coming to Congress in day 3 of the campaign. And the President says in this letter, these military operations have been carefully planned to accomplish our goals with the minimum loss of life among coalition military forces and to innocent civilians. The President goes on to say in this letter that he cannot say how long this military campaign will go on because it is in such early stages. Now, we are told by senior officials that in the planning, Mr. Bush was involved in selecting individual targets, that he would ask the generals what else is in that neighborhood, how close is it to residential areas, what is the risk of civilian life if you strike that building. But now, Ari Fleischer telling us at the White House briefing today, now 3 days after the President executed the broad order authorizing this campaign, Ari Fleischer says the President is involved and consulted constantly, but he is not trying to micromanage the generals.
President believes that the best way to carry out a military operation is to very carefully, thoroughly review the plans in advance, to ask the hard questions of the planners as the plan is being developed, to have a team in whom he has confidence, to have a military on the ground that is superbly trained, well equipped, and well paid. The President is satisfied that those criteria have been met. He would not have authorized action had he not been satisfied that those criteria were met.
The President at this hour is up at the Camp David Presidential Retreat. Here you see him walking to Marine One earlier in the day, up at Camp David for the weekend after receiving a briefing here at the White House at which he was told that this was the day the military would escalate the air attack campaign inside Iraq. We also have some behind-the-scenes photos of the President in the run-up to this military campaign provided by the White House. This actually is a photograph from Camp David, post-September 11th, 2001. To those who might ask, how can the President run a war from Camp David? Here you see him in a National Security Council meeting, this again late 2001. On the wall there, those 4 screens, a secure video conference link. If Mr. Bush wanted to use that this weekend, he could pick up the phone, for example, and say, call General Tommy Franks, his commander in the region. I believe we also have some photographs, though, from here at the White House in the run-up to the war. Mr. Bush, this is the President, the Vice President, and the Defense Secretary outside the Oval Office just moments after the President turned to Secretary Rumsfeld and said, let's go. This is inside the Oval Office. This is the meeting at which the President authorized essentially rewriting the battle plan on the fly because of that intelligence that Saddam Hussein and some of his key leadership officials were in that residential compound in Baghdad. CIA Director Tenet, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, and others rushed over to the White House. This here is today a rare glimpse of the White House Situation Room, the most secure room here in the above-ground White House facility where the President conducts his national security meetings almost every morning. You see the President at the end of the table, the full Bush, as they now openly call it here at the White House, War Council around the table. So, Judy, Mr. Bush up at Camp David for the weekend. A key question continuing here today, is Saddam Hussein alive, and is he running the Iraqi government? Ari Fleischer saying that since that strike on Wednesday night, the United States has no conclusive evidence at all that either Saddam Hussein or either of his 2 sons have been issuing orders, keeping track of the military. One other senior official telling me behind the scenes that U.S. intelligence sources and Pentagon sources are telling the President the Iraqi leadership is in complete confusion and complete disarray. Judy?
Pretty strong statement. John, just quickly, the woman we saw in that picture in the Oval Office is Karen Hughes, who formerly was in the White House on paid staff as a counselor to the President. She now has moved back to Texas, but she is very evident, very much with the President at Kima. There she is standing on the left. I think one more indication of her deep involvement ongoing in the decision making at this White House and her influence on the President. John, just very quickly, I was struck by the fact at the briefing when Ari Fleischer was asked if the President was watching any of the bombardment of Baghdad unfolding on television. He at first said no, the President doesn't watch television. He later acknowledged, well, maybe he turns it on or glances at it every once in a while, but he wanted to make it clear that the President's not sitting in front of a television set.
Yeah, striking. Ari Fleischer saying he was with the President at the very moment the escalation of the air campaign was being shown on our network and other networks across this country and indeed around the world. He said at that moment the President was not watching. He could not say whether the President later turned on the television, but on this day and on many other days we are told by senior officials this is not a President who, especially in the presence of his staff, spends much time watching the television.
All right. Thanks, John. At the White House, speaking of the television, administration officials reminding us at a number of occasions today that what we're seeing on television is just one part or parts of a much bigger campaign underway across Iraq. And for more on exactly what that campaign consists of, let's turn to our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. Barbara, from a military perspective, where is this campaign right now? How far along is it?
Well, they've now crossed a key line today by beginning this massive air assault on Baghdad. By all accounts, they switched things around a bit. They put ground forces first, we are told, because there was a decision that they needed to ensure they could secure the southern oil fields. Over the last day or so, they began to see some of those oil fields burning. The decision was made, switch things around, get ground forces in, secure the oil fields, because that was a key signal to the world that the U.S. could control the situation. And then today, they made the decision to go ahead with the very visible air campaign against Baghdad. We are told by Secretary Rumsfeld that they only did this as a last resort. Up until the last, they had some hope that perhaps the Iraqi high command, the top leaders around Saddam Hussein, would surrender in some fashion, turn their back on the regime, and basically push Saddam out of power. Secretary Rumsfeld saying when that didn't happen, they had no choice but to go to this effort now. Now, indeed, we are told there are things happening all over Iraq. According to the schedule, there will be some 1,500 munitions dropped across Iraq in this first 24-hour period of the air campaign, in the north, in the south, and over central Iraq, over Baghdad. We are told the target set is what you would expect: air defense, communications, Republican Guard, Special Republican Guard, the units closest to Saddam Hussein, some of the fiber optic cable switching stations that they've been hitting for so many weeks now. And what they're going to have to do at some point very quickly is try and do some bomb damage assessment, take a read of how much destruction they have successfully put on Iraq now, and make an assessment of the command and control capability from Baghdad, whether or not the regime, or what is left of it, has an ability to communicate orders out to the field. That's going to be a key BDA, or bomb damage assessment, that they're going to make over the next several hours. Officials are warning us here there's still the possibility that they could run into trouble. U.S. ground forces only about 100 miles or so inside Iraq, still largely in the south, where the population was expected not to put up a large amount of resistance, the military force not. As they get closer to Baghdad, as they begin to encounter the Republican Guard, there is concern that they could still fight. But right now, one of the assessments they're coming to is trying to decide just how much the regime in Baghdad is still in control. Judy?
That is the huge question of the hour. All right, Barbara Starr, our correspondent at the Pentagon. Now let's move back to Kuwait City and to Wolf.
Thanks very much, Judy. CNN has reporters covering every facet of this story, especially the U.S. military as it makes its moves into Iraq. Kira Phillips is aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, one of the aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf. We're going to go to her shortly. But CNN's Bob Franken is at an air base in northern Kuwait, not far from the Iraqi border. He's joining us now live with late information that he has. Bob?
Well, Wolf, as you have by now found out, one of the key spots where A-Day began was at this airfield. It is not far from you. It is close to the border with Iraq. It is a major launching point for the United States Air Force, and the British Royal Air Force uses it also with the Harrier jets. And many of these jets have been screaming out of here tonight, countless. As a matter of fact, this is a very rare lull, and consider yourself fortunate, because we've had nothing but ear-splitting jet takeoffs and landings throughout the night, right over there, right by the airstrip. The flight line, which as you can see is at a rare moment of quiet, but as you can see also, the night has been filled with the flames of the jets and the loud noise as the jets have taken off to take the attack to Iraq, and an attack, of course, that we have watched on television to some degree in Baghdad, and also not watched on television when it has occurred in the many other parts of Iraq where the jets have gone. This, as I said, is a major launching point. Some of the planes that leave from here are the F-16s and the F-A-18s, which are both fighters and bombers, and then you have the A-10s, which are the anti-tank weapons, which have been so very active, sort of softening the enemy in the last couple of days, the enemy of the United States. It's been extremely busy. Other planes involved here, search and rescue and the like, and it seems that all of them were screaming out of here tonight and coming back. This has been a frenzy of activity, and as I said, there's a brief lull now, but I can assure you, Wolf, it is brief. It is going to go on throughout the night. Wolf?
All right, Bob, stay safe over there. Bob Franken, he's near the Iraqi border. We'll get back to you. I want to go to Kira Phillips now. She's aboard one of those aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, the USS Abraham Lincoln. A busy night, I take it, for the crew, with some 6,000 aboard the aircraft carrier, Kira.
Wolf, no doubt. Joint Chiefs of Staff General Richard Myers said yesterday that large-scale operations were approaching. Well, welcome to Shock and Awe from the USS Abraham Lincoln. Let's take a look now at the first video elements that I just fed you. This is what strike fighter pilots have been training for. Massive airstrikes, fast and furious. You're looking at video images from the flight deck here on the USS Abraham Lincoln. After Tomahawk missiles were launched, strike fighters engaged their targets, military sites, air defense systems, government buildings, Iraqi leadership compounds, and air bases. There were also restricted strike areas, mosques, schools, water and electricity, and chemical storage areas. I've been told if Saddam Hussein is hiding weapons in those areas, they will be taken care of by other means. Pilots say they were fired upon consistently. Threats they were up against: SAMs, surface-to-air missiles, old Soviet MiG-25s, and lots of AAA fire. In the strike briefs, we're going to take a look now at the other video element that we fed into you just recently. This is the strike brief that took place. We were able to observe this strike brief, a unique opportunity to be able to observe this. Lots of talk about preventing collateral damage. This took place in a number of ways, one of which precision weapons. Between the F-18 and the F-14 jets, weapons included JDAMs, LGB, laser-guided bombs, Sidewinder heat-seeking missiles, Sparrow, Phoenix, and AMRAAM radar-guided missiles. Now, the squadron that led this strike package off the USS Abraham Lincoln tonight, the F-31, the F-14 Tomcatters. Before the strikes, Squadron Commander Paul Haas stressed to his men situational awareness. This is what he had to say. Being told that we do not have that sound. We will try and get that up and bring that to you. But I can tell you that once the strikes over Baghdad began, as you can imagine, more video elements here. These are the strike fighter pilots that were not on the nighttime mission in their ready room. They remained pinned to their seats in the ready room, watching the air campaign as it went down live on CNN. As they observed the airstrike, they were not surprised. So far, they say, shock and awe is underway as planned. Wolf?
All right, Kira, thanks very much. Before I let you go, did all the U.S. aircraft return safely to that aircraft carrier?
I can tell you, Wolf, that yes, they did. Before we were able to go live off here, the USS Abraham Lincoln, we got the word that all the strike fighters were headed back to the carrier, safe and sound. Mission accomplished successfully.
Kira Phillips aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Persian Gulf. It's been a busy several hours as warplanes took off, now returned, landed aboard that deck aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. Kira, we're going to be checking back with you often. Thanks very much. Now let's get back to Judy in Washington.
Thanks, Wolf. And the fact that they did get back safely has got to make for very good news for the families of all of those pilots and all of the crew members. A little while ago, just a short time ago, we showed you some video of the Iraqi information minister. He had toured some of the damage as a result of the U.S. airstrikes on Baghdad. And here is what he said. We have the full tape now of what he said to reporters. We just got this just moments ago. Let's watch and listen.
That used to be the residence, the quarters of the قصر صغير متواضع
حولناه إلى متحف لمرحلة من مراحل التطور السياسي في العراق. قصر الزهور أيضا قصفوه حولوه هذه الأنقاض. أنا فقط أريد أن أقول للعالم أن هؤلاء المجرمين عصابة الأوغاد الدوليين أرجوكم إلى كل أحرار العالم هؤلاء لا يستحقوا أن يعاملوا إلا بالأحذية. هذا المجرم الجالس القابع في البيت الأبيض هذا مجرم تافه. هذا وزير الدفاع ماله لا يستحق إلا الضرب على الرأس. هؤلاء المجرمون يكذبون على العالم.
Again, we're listening to the Iraqi information minister, Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf. He had done a tour of some of the damaged area, but again, it was very difficult to understand the translation. We're going to try to bring that up, and once we can, we'll try to bring it to you again in a way that you can understand. A wrap up now of the developments this hour. Let's go to Heidi Collins for a news alert.
Thank you, Judy. Baghdad is a city under assault. Starting about 3 hours ago, a heavy U.S. air attack rained down on targets across the city, setting buildings on fire and sending plumes of black smoke high into the sky. Pentagon officials say they expect to unleash about 1,500 bombs and missiles on targets all across Iraq in the first 24 hours. It is a day of conquest for coalition forces in southern and western Iraq. U.S. military officials say the Faw Peninsula is now under coalition control after a battle with Iraqi troops in the port city of Qasr. U.S. officials say 2 airfields in western Iraq known as H2 and H3 were also captured. Unofficial tells CNN Iraq is suspected of hiding weapons of mass destruction at one of those sites. Here's a quick look so you can see for yourself now the portions of Iraq that are currently controlled by coalition forces. At the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld told reporters the U.S. continues to oppose the involvement of Turkish troops in Kurdish-controlled northern Iraq. Rumsfeld said a large number of Turkish forces in the area would be what he called notably unhelpful. The U.S. death toll in the strike on Iraq is at least 6. The Pentagon is confirming the second U.S. combat death, a Marine who died from wounds he suffered in a fight with Iraqi troops. 12 coalition troops, 8 British, and 4 U.S. Marines were killed earlier in a helicopter crash in Kuwait. CNN's coverage of the strike on Iraq continues right now.
Welcome back. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Kuwait City. Frank Buckley, CNN's Frank Buckley, is aboard the USS Constellation, an aircraft carrier also in the Persian Gulf, an aircraft carrier that has seen a lot of warplanes take off and now return to that carrier. Frank, tell us what's happening now.
Well, Wolf, we're continuing to talk to some of the naval aviators as they come out of their jets from the first strike package that left the Constellation, the Oscar Bravo Sierra package. Joining me now, Lieutenant Mike Herbert from the Vigilantes, an F-18 driver, as well as Commander Walt Stammer, also an F-18 pilot from the Kestrels squadron. First, we'll start with you, Lieutenant. Just your impressions of going into Baghdad.
The first impression is initially just wow. It's a lot different than anything we've done in the past, and in reality, it's just a culmination of everything we've ever trained to do. So to me, it was just real eye-opening and actually kind of exciting. I'm still, like I told you, I'm still got a lot of adrenaline flowing around, so pretty excited about the whole thing. You weren't a bolter when you came back, though, right? You were able to... Negative. Nope. Came right down.
Okay, 3-wire?
Something like that.
Okay. Commander, yourself, tell us about the mission. Tell us what you saw as you were flying over Baghdad.
Well, what we really saw was a lot of shooting going on. I think they lots of missiles coming up, lots of AAA. And looked like probably the aftermath of some other strikes that were going on. I think the entire coalition played in this one.
The sight of going in, and you've obviously, you were saying this is your 4th cruise here off in the Persian Gulf, your 2nd cruise, Lieutenant. You've trained this, you've flown into Iraq, but never above the 33rd parallel. Tell me how it's different for you once you cross that line.
Well, when you cross the line, you know that you're getting ready to kick a beehive, and so that's what it is. They're coming after you, and they do.
And tell me the kinds of defenses that you faced. There was a lot of talk before this first strike that while you had the U.S. forces, coalition forces, had eroded defenses south of the 33rd, there was a lot of concern about the ring of air defenses around Baghdad. Is it still a threat?
Absolutely. There's still plenty of missiles out there. There's plenty of AAA, and I'm sure he's got some tricks up his sleeve, too.
Lieutenant, yourself, this is your first wartime attack. Obviously, you've flown Operation Southern Watch, which are combat sorties, but wartime situation, you're releasing munitions. Tell me, walk me through the sensation of doing that and knowing what's going to happen when those missiles leave the rails.
Well, for me today, it was real exciting because it's with a specific weapon I've been training to, specifically for about 2.5 years just alone. And to finally get to use that weapon for what it's intended to, which is to stay far away from those defenses and be able to strike a target safely while doing work with the weapon itself. Was honestly, it was really neat to be able to do that. And also just, I remember back to the Gulf War and seeing video from seeker heads of weapons and watching them fly into the target, and to actually do that myself for the first time when I remember in high school seeing it on TV, on being able to see that. Now to actually do it, it's a whole different world. It's something I never really expected to do, even though I joined the military. It's just, you never joined expecting to do something like this, but it was a heck of an experience.
And explain to viewers, you guys are talking in a sort of, you say, an adrenaline-filled moment. Every aviator that I've talked to says, look, we don't want war. I mean, it's not, explain that feeling to the viewers if you can, to try to distinguish between your professional achievement and also the knowledge of what your munitions are doing. Commander, take a strike at that.
I think we all enjoy training, but when somebody's actually shooting at you, that's a little bit different. And so I think that's what changes the why we don't want war. We don't want to get shot at. Quite honestly, we'd like to train to make sure that we can protect what needs to be protected, but to ask for something I don't think is necessarily what we'd like to do.
Is there any emotion at all attached to knowing that these bombs are going to potentially kill people? What about, how do you deal with that part of it?
We only go after military targets, so it's them against us, and I think that's the easiest way to deal with it. Is try not to make it too personal and let them die for their country vice us dying for ours.
Lieutenant, you take a stab at that one.
As far as the not wanting to go to war, really, as far as the training goes, we try to train hard and be the best in the world so that no one wants to go to war with us. And we are the best in the world. And to see that people are still opposing basically the whole world in this coalition, and the way what we're trying to do, freeing the Iraqi people and keeping up with the UN resolutions, we train hard so that people don't want to fight us. When it gets to this point, it's gone over the precipice and where we don't want to be. But that's why we train real hard in addition, is so that we can take care of business if we're called upon to do it, and that's why we're here.
Captain Mark Fox, the Air Wing commander, in his brief earlier this evening, said to you, gentlemen, you'll never forget this day. You're flying downtown. I'll ask you both for your impressions. What is it? What are the memories that you're going to take flying in over the city? Tell me about that.
Really, just seeing the amount of AAA and everything coming up for the first time. Like I said, it's like out of a movie. You watch old World War II movies of all the flak coming up, and then you add to that the SAMs that are coming up. And again, from what we've seen in the news from the first Gulf War, is seeing all the tracers and everything. And we're wearing NVGs, the same kind of technology that was in the cameras that you could see stuff during the Gulf War.
Night vision goggles.
Correct. Sorry. Wearing a night vision goggles, so you can see everything that they're putting up at you, and it's just a spectacular light show. And it's kind of grounded in the fact that they're actually shooting at you and trying to knock you out of the sky.
Commander, your just personal impressions?
I think they've got plenty of stuff. They shot quite a bit more than I was expecting, and I think they've still got more to shoot. So that was probably we're gonna be there for a while. I think is probably the best way to put that.
I try to imagine your families right now must be home. They've probably been worried about you. Hopefully they're seeing your faces right now. Anything you want to say to them?
Hi, Kate. I love you. And everyone else, be home soon, I hope.
Missy, Walter, Mary Kate, Mom, Dad, Grandma, hi, everybody.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. A couple of the aviators, look, these are human beings, and you get a sense of it right there. They're professionals, and they are doing a job that is one that most of us, let's face it, couldn't do, and they are dropping bombs that are causing a lot of destruction, in some cases death. That is one part of what they do. The other part is the human part, and that's what they are ultimately. You got a sense of that right now. Literally just out of their jets and taking time to talk to us after this first strike into Iraq off the USS Constellation. Back to you.
Frank Buckley aboard the USS Constellation, speaking with those two aviators who had participated in the start of A-Day, the start of this massive U.S. air campaign against selected targets inside Iraq. Let's get some more analysis now. CNN's Miles O'Brien is standing by in Atlanta for that. Miles?
All right, I'm joined by General, I just demoted you. I apologize, General.
We're all majors one.
Wesley Clark, thank you very much. I'm a buck private right now. Thank you very much for being with us. Let's talk, first of all, quickly about naval aviation for just a moment. Not necessarily your core expertise, but just to give folks a little idea of those two pilots and some of the aircraft there. I didn't hear whether they were flying F-14s or F-18s, but those are the two fighter attack aircraft that are on board a carrier, the FA-18 Hornet. There's a Super Hornet version out now, which has some additional capabilities. Supersonic range of about 1,700, of course, can be refueled air-to-air and air-to-ground missiles. So it has a fighter, which is air-to-air, and then an attack role as well, and obviously carrier-based. The F-14, built primarily as an air-to-air, the Tomcat, but has over the years evolved into an air-to-ground role as the U.S. military has evolved, has all-weather capability. I wanted to bring up that point that the pilots brought up about how they felt that there was more stuff being shot at them than they thought they might anticipate. That surprised you?
It did, actually, based on the comments we've been hearing, Miles, about the Iraqi command and control. So I think two things. Obviously, from the discussion, they came in at the end of another package. So they got a little bit of the other package. They saw that in the distance. It sounds like they didn't go right over back downtown Baghdad, and it sounds like there's still effective command and control of the air defense system if they're launching a series of missiles at them.
All right, so what they intimated to us was that they were firing some weapon, although we weren't quite sure what it was. They didn't say what it was, but it had what is called a standoff capability. In other words, the aircraft and the pilot can do its job outside of true harm's way. This is pretty much standard operating procedure now for naval and Air Force aviation, right?
It is, but we didn't have these weapons in 1991, not these kinds of weapons. They've been developed during the 1990s. We saw the need to be able to outrange the enemy's air defense missile system and his target acquisition, close-in radars, and the flak guns. And so we basically can launch, we can guide that missile in from 15, 20, 30 miles out, depending on what the system is, and right into the impact.
All right, now, the likely aircraft, if there are aircraft going straight over Baghdad, and we can make a supposition that that is possible, but there's a certain type of aircraft that would be involved. We've told you a lot about them. Stealth technology, radar, thwarting aircraft. I wouldn't say invisible to radar. The F-117 is one to look at. This is about the size of an F-15, which is a conventional fighter that is seen by radar. It's not the fastest aircraft, not as fast as an F-15, but speed is not its weapon. Obviously, that angularity of it makes it sort of difficult to see on radar. But as you discovered during Kosovo, it isn't exactly bulletproof, quite literally.
Well, we knew that, and we've always tried to do our best to be careful with these aircraft. But if you get in an operating pattern where they expect you to come and you continue to fly over the same kinds of targets, and we had some pretty limited avenues of approach in the Kosovo campaign because of geography was a little more restricted, and there was a moon, and there were clouds, and I don't understand what happened to it, but maybe they saw it at night. In any event, it says one thing to you, that don't lose aircraft if you don't have to. There's no reason to take unnecessary risks with these aircraft. We've got complete dominance here. We're working this step by step exactly the right way as I see this campaign unfolding, which is you take down his air defense first, you protect your airmen and your aircraft. You only are going to use them if you have to.
All right, another stealth technology, the B-2 bomber, which has a little more payload capability. Also, in addition to being stealthy, also has the capability of launching those satellite-guided weapons, which allows the B-2 to not necessarily be right overhead necessarily in order to do its job. The B-2 can carry a little more than the F-117. That's why it has an important role. One other thing to think about is the buff, the big, ugly, well, we'll call it fat fellow at this point for our cable audience here. The buff, the B-52, is also in this, and this is an aircraft that first flew in the early 50s. but it is outfitted in a way that changes its mission dramatically. It has the capability of carrying air-launched cruise missiles. Now that comes into play in what respect?
Well, these are able to go in, they carry a very large warhead, and they are able to go in just under the speed of sound from a long distance away. So the aircraft is totally protected. The cruise missiles are such a small radar target that they're almost impossible to shoot down. And so it's a very effective weapon, especially in the opening stages of a campaign against a heavily defended target.
And whenever you talk opening stages, you talk about those cruise missiles. The Tomahawk missile has come into play. I've lost count of the numbers.
It must be in the hundreds by this time.
In the hundreds already. Once again, the key here is this is something that isn't flying so fast. It flies about as fast as a commercial airliner, but it's going low, hugging the contour of the land, not easy to spot on radar, doesn't have a big heat signature, which is a problem, and as a result is able to get inside, and then has this tremendous accuracy because of satellite technology as well as terrain recognition. Now, I want to ask you one thing. We keep talking about these precision weapons as if they're a complete panacea, almost antiseptic war. Nevertheless, there are going to be civilian casualties. What is the plan if the Baghdad regime tries to make hay out of that somehow?
Well, the first part of the plan is don't allow unnecessary casualties in this campaign. And so we're doing everything we can to prevent it. Secretary Rumsfeld talked about it today. But it's basically use the right weapon for the target, the smallest weapon possible, carefully look at the avenue of approach that you're going to, the trajectory. So if it misses in the least harmful way possible. And so you'll get 98, 99% of these weapons right on target, and it's no problem. But you will have 1 or 2% who don't. And it's very possible that at some point that will be exploited. It was in the Kosovo campaign exploited by the Serbs, and it's one of those hard facts of life. I think you have to demonstrate your intent to avoid civilian casualties early on, as the United States is doing here. And then accidents happen inevitably.
All right, the former Supreme NATO Commander, General Wesley Clark, thank you very much. Appreciate your insights. Send it to Judy.
Miles, we've been talking today about just how much command, how much control Saddam Hussein has over his forces, his military forces, and over the government of Iraq. One thing is clear, though, there are people in Baghdad who think it's still smart to show their loyalty to Saddam Hussein. We want to show you some pictures that have just come in to us in the last hour. These are people out in the streets of Baghdad showing defiance toward the American attacks. We don't know whether these are soldiers. I think what I see, at least a few uniforms, perhaps a few in civilian. We don't know who these people are, but this is a video that was provided by Iraqi television, and so we are showing it to you. It's not translated, but whatever they are shouting is presumably pro-Saddam Hussein, pro-Iraq. You see an Iraqi flag being held up there and against the United States. On the other hand, in southern Iraq, still inside Iraq, you see people who are cheering the arrival of U.S. troops, pulling down a poster of Saddam Hussein. It's the same country, different parts of the country. This is liberated southern Iraq, where you can see they are welcoming American troops, shaking hands, smiling, looking not at all unhappy to see U.S. troops in control. So there you have two different